Good morning. I'm Byron Fager, CEO at the Southern Illinois Community Foundation. Welcome to Philanthropy Speaks, the development series. Today we feature a discussion panel called Fundraising Through a Crisis Roundtable. As you may be aware, the original in-person sessions that were planned for 2020 have been postponed, and those of you that have registered will still get that training when we're able to meet again in person. This year, all of the on-site training through John A. Logan has been canceled, and so we are looking at other venues for possibly late this year, or else we will make sure that it all happens beginning in early 2021. So that has changed our focus, and for the rest of 2020, we will be hosting these monthly roundtable discussions, and throughout this social distancing, we think that it will help our nonprofits to prepare how to deal with some of these issues that we're dealing with today. While we are finalizing our plans and the topics, we hope that you will plan to spend some time with us each of the third Tuesdays for the rest of this year. I am pleased to announce that our next session will be on July 21st, and will focus on diversity, empowerment, inclusion for nonprofit leadership. Russ has already been working hard to have a very special guest join us for our July meeting and help us with our discussion. So our plan for this training will be to bring experts from Southern Illinois and from outside Southern Illinois to help us further our nonprofit capacity and effectiveness. I am pleased to announce and introduce you to Russell Williams, our Director of Community Impact Learning and Leadership for the Southern Illinois Community Foundation. That is a heck of a title. We got as many letters in there as possible to just to make sure we could fill up the business card. And so Russ is a Southern Illinois native and has over 13 years of experience fundraising in Southern Illinois for both the Brim School and the American Cancer Society. In recent years, Russ has shifted his focus to leadership development and training in the business sector. So at SICF, we were very pleased to be able to bring those leadership and training skills to the Southern Illinois nonprofit sector. So with that, I will turn things over to you, Russ.
There may not be big money in nonprofit organizations, but the titles are really good. You can come up with the great titles. So there's some incentive right there. But I'm very thankful and blessed to be working with Byram and our Southern Illinois Community Foundation, a great effort throughout Southern Illinois, especially right now with all the monies that have been coming through the Community Foundation during COVID-19 and being able to help our small businesses and nonprofits throughout all the counties of Southern Illinois. So it's a blessing to do that. As Byram said, we're going to join this way every month. Our target is to do the third Tuesday of each month, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of this program. And it's going to be roundtables. It's going to be interactive, and so we want as many nonprofit leaders to join us, but also to interact and tell us how you're doing. Especially during this time of COVID-19. We've seen the beginning of it. I don't know if we've seen the end of it, but we seem to be opening back up here in Southern Illinois. And so today we're going to be talking about fundraising through COVID-19 crisis. I'm going to share my screen with you. So if you are on video, hopefully you're going to be able to see a PowerPoint presentation. And if you can see that now, just nod your head up and down. Great. Fundraising through COVID-19 crisis. I don't know if anybody remember the old Hee Haw episodes that some of us used to watch on Saturday nights. In particular, the shows that featured Archie Campbell, and Archie Campbell played a barber. Do you remember those? And Roy Clark would be sitting in the barber chair, and they would go back and forth. Archie Campbell would always say that, that he had news, and Roy Clark said, "Oh, okay, what kind of news?" And he goes, "Well, something like, my uncle died." And Roy Clark would say, "Well, that's bad news." And he goes, and Archie Campbell would say, "No, that's good news. He left me with $50,000 inherited." And then Roy Clark would say, "Well, that's good news." And Archie Campbell would say, "No, that's bad news. The IRS took, half of that, so only have $25,000. And so the segment would go back and forth. That's a little bit like how fundraising through the COVID-19 crisis is, that we've got some bad news, and then on the other hand, there might be some good news too. And that's probably true for your organization. At least I'm hoping that you've got some good news in your organization. But I wanted to share with you a very short presentation before we start the discussion about how things are going in our fundraising and how we can help each other and be supportive. And that is to talk a little bit, a helicopter view, what they call a 50,000-foot view of how things are going for fundraising. And some of this comes from a survey through about the impact of COVID-19. It comes from a survey that the group CCS Fundraising did just this past month. I believe they began about April 20th and went through May 1st. And these are some things that they found to be true with the nonprofits that they surveyed. And of course, the first one is that the majority of nonprofits expected fundraising to decline throughout 2020. So there's the news that we all know about, is that our fundraising has suffered. It's taken a huge impact. And some 63% of the responding nonprofits in the survey cited that they currently have a decline in fundraising since the start of the pandemic. And about a 25% of them said that there was a significant fundraising decline. And it impacted, according to that survey, our religious groups most, our religious and cultural organizations that were hit particularly hard. And then nearly 15% of the respondents said that they actually saw an increase during this time. And those tended to be hospitals and health and human services organizations. And so almost 4 out of the 5 organizations that reported into the survey said that they expected a decline throughout 2020. And half of those reported that it would be they expected a significant decline. And only barely 10% said that they thought there might be an equal amount of fundraising or maybe an increase throughout 2020. And so the good news is that despite those economic hardships, 3/4 of these organizations said that they didn't have to make reductions in their staff. Very few of them had laid off or furloughed fundraising staff. And they explained that the reason for this is that they were able to find a different role or a different job, especially if they had fundraising staff, if they had development officers or people that were working for events, that since they were going to have those events anymore this year, at least during this time, that they moved those staff members over to other roles, whether it might be social media or whether it might be front, answering the phones, responding to people by email. They found some other jobs, and so they didn't find overall a significant reduction. Only about 10% said that they had reduced their fundraising staff or any of their staff. Of course, the ones that have been hit the hardest were those event-focused nonprofits like our cultural or performing arts sectors were hit the hardest. And then the ones that were not hit as hard were like in the health and education and human services again. They saw the least amount of impact to their own staff. The survey also showed that most nonprofits plan to continue their pre-existing campaign plans. So if they had capital campaigns or any other major fundraising campaigns, then they were going to make adjustments, but they were going to continue with those plans. And they didn't see, they might repurpose some of our staff, as I said, but they would definitely try to move forward with those plans. And so part of those plans was to pick up their major donor strategies. They planned on focusing more on major donors during this time, that in addition to the general appeals that they would provide to all their stakeholders, their strategy was to reach out to those core groups, those current donors, those current stakeholders, especially the major donors, and ask for direct appeal, ask for a certain amount of money or to help them during this time. They also found that nonprofits have been adjusting or expanding their cases of support in order to focus on their COVID-19 programs. They may not have COVID-19 programs before, but they certainly made the adjustments. I think around here, Boys and Girls Club, I'm on the task force to bring a Marion site to the Boys and Girls Club of Southern Illinois. And one thing that Tina Carpenter, the executive director of Boys and Girls Club, has provided for us and their development person is how COVID-19, how the Boys and Girls Club has addressed the COVID-19 impact on the children and the families that they serve, and was able to show visual or written form, how they've enhanced their programs to help people in need at this time and what the need might be for, especially during COVID-19. And so those sectors that reported the greatest adjustments were reporting on their case for support, and especially in education, in healthcare, and human services, like I said, the Boys and Girls Club. And as you all know, and probably have experienced, there's been a huge uptick with using online fundraising and social media. And so the pandemic has caused an accelerant, for many organizations to get into new operating methods, and that's include, if they weren't in social media before or they weren't in the digital place, then they're attempting to do that. Our houses of worship, our religious organizations very much are going to all online because it's very much, in the room focused. And now that we're fundraising in place, just as we've been sheltering in place, this forced some organizations to set up more into the digital world. And that includes organizations that had no way of people giving online. And so they've been able to create those click buttons on their websites to make a donation and to show that how their nonprofit is helping people, and by you giving online, tying the case of support into what's going on right now. The other thing I wanted to share with you today is also another report. So this all came from Nonprofit Times, most recently on June 1st, but also what is forecasted as with the newest economic data and what it might mean for fundraising. And I should point out that I'm not a prognosticator, and this is not coming from somebody that can, predict very strongly this is what the next 6 months look like. But definitely there are indicators in fundraising to show what the landscape is going to look like. And this comes from the Fundraising School, which is out of the Lilly School of Philanthropy out of Indianapolis, which I've been fortunate enough to take many courses and receive some certification. But, there's some good news and some bad news here. April shows that there was a 33% increase in savings in the United States, and that's huge. That's a huge indicator of people, the propensity for people to save, to put money into their savings account. It's sort of a risk aversion behavior of people not, you may have done this before. You didn't know what the forecast was going to be for your own family economy, and so you put back money. You started saving money. The interesting part about it is that in the next month, May figures show that we had the highest monthly increase in consumer spending that we've ever had in 1 month. As long as the government's been reporting on consumer spending, May shows the highest monthly increase in consumer spending. So there's almost like reverse behavior. Is like in April we were afraid, we didn't want to take risks, so we saved. But in May, all of a sudden we found opportunities to buy and purchase, if you look at it, some really high ticket purchases, things like binge spending on maybe cars or new homes or home improvements. And you ask, why would that be? Why would that happen? Because it's more riskier spending. But I think it could be explained in some way in that most families may have target savings amount, like we want to save so much, but once we have that goal, we have that target amount, then we're willing to spend. And so that could be an explanation that in May people, had less expenses. If you think about what we have been doing or what we haven't been doing, we haven't been traveling as much. The vacations are not as costly maybe. People are choosing to take more local vacations instead of traveling overseas. And so expenses of staying at home and working from home are less than if you're driving. Gas prices or even your clothing cleaner prices. There's so many different ways that we've saved more money. And so that means that we've had an opportunity. People have chosen, may have shown that people have chosen to start spending. what does that mean for donations? If people are willing to donate that money, again, this is an uncharted and unprecedented time, so we are really shooting from the hip to make predictions. But the thought is that wealth becomes, stock, and that as people do save and their savings grow, that becomes wealth. And figures show that people give about 7% of their income or their wealth away, more their wealth. And so out of every $100 that is put into a savings account or put into an investment, then people are willing to give away about $7 of that. And so there's an opportunity to be, not Pollyanna, but to be positive on what the outlook might be, that people might have the liberty to not just spend, but also to donate. And then also, it's important to know that the COVID-19 recession has had an uneven impact, that not everybody has been affected the same. Some people continue to work, they kept their jobs, but the switch was that they just started working at home. And so their expenses, as I said, went down, but other people, your neighbor may have lost their job and may not have the same income as they did before. And so it's a very uneven impact, and that has to be thought of as in donors, is that I don't think we should be totally afraid of making appeals and asking for donations, but to realize that some people were impacted greatly by the COVID-19 and some people are not going to be impacted at all with the recession. And so that's good to keep in mind. The other indicator, I think, of what it means for fundraising and what COVID-19 currently means for our economic data is, of course, looking at the stock market. And we like to look at, as fundraisers, we look at the S&P 500 and we look at how it's doing. Fortunately, donors are not swayed day by day by their stocks. Some people decided that there's a drop in stocks, I'm going to sell, and they took a loss. But most donors are in the stock market over the long haul, and they're looking at trends. They're not looking at day-to-day operations, which is good for us in fundraising. So donors look at trends, and if you look at the beginning of the crisis, yes, there's a huge impact on the stock market. But you know what? Since then, as of late here in June, we've had this kind of a nice gain in the stock market according to the S&P 500. And so the stock people did take advantage of the stock market when prices became very low. Some people entered the stock market and started purchasing. And so our forecast that the experts tell us is that the best case scenario is that we're going to recover in the next 6 months. And the stock market might even get back to the point that it started in January of this year, which was huge. Stock market was doing incredible in January. And so there could be substantial gains. We don't know how COVID-19 might affect that, and none of us, know what might resurge through COVID-19 in the next 6 months. But that's the best case scenario, and it's not good times, bad times. We started off the year really good. The Giving USA report, which is the annual report on fundraising, just came out this month in June, and it looks at 2019. It doesn't look at 2020 yet, but it looks at 2019, and it showed over or almost $450 billion the United States was donated to charities, to nonprofits, and that's huge. That's the second highest total given that's been adjusted by inflation since this has been kept, and this record's been kept for 6 decades. So it's the highest year, and it's actually the 6th year that has increased. So that the trend was that the philanthropy was increasing, not across the board for every sector, but overall, almost $450 billion given to charities, including churches and religious groups. And so, of course, that's all changed now. A huge impact by COVID-19. And so that's where we leave it. And I wanted to open it up for questions. I asked Byram if he could connect everybody else. by their microphones, and you may need to take yourself off the mic. These are some questions, and you may have feedback or responses on what I just presented. But what I want us to look at is what's now. What challenges and obstacles do you have in your organization or you've had over the last 3 months? And what impact has that had on your fundraising and sustainability? And what has been your organization's response during the COVID-19 crisis? But also as a leader, how have you led, during this crisis? And then I want us to talk about opportunities. What opportunities do you see in fundraising, and especially in the next 6 months here that we enter tomorrow? So I'd love to hear some feedback and some questions, and I'm going to facilitate our discussion. Would anybody like to jump in and share first?
As I mentioned before, everybody was muted automatically, but all you have to do is hit the unmute button on your screen. I'll start off with part of this, Russ. So one of the things I think that we have a lot to figure out is all of us had major fundraising events this year. Many of them were to be held during the time period where we were sheltering in place. And so I think a lot of question is, how is that going to work? Are we going to get donors to come out to these events again in the next 3 months, or is that 6 months or more out? Today I don't think would be very easy for us to fill a banquet hall with 300 people. I just don't know that everybody's ready to go back to that scenario. And so I don't know what the right answer is for fundraising, but we know that people are starting to give again.
This is Bill, and I also would like to ask a question about that. What are people doing? Has anybody really reached out for virtual events? Is anybody planning one? What are you running into? What are your obstacles? And, what is, maybe it's a great new avenue for funds that we've never explored.
Well, at Carbondale Community Arts, we're planning some virtual art gallery events, and we're going to get our website up and do that, and hopefully have those buttons on there to donate. But we just want to, keep sharing art with our community and the university. So that's what we're planning to do. Some virtual, and also virtual gallery shop. It's all in the process.
Are you doing that in-house, or do you have help?
No, we're having lots of help, lots of helpers to develop our website and get us ready to be able to do the virtual meetings. And but we're got asked some help from community people to help us with that.
Good. So the volunteers are stepping up and helping you do that.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, because we just figured that once we get the virtual thing going, and we're trying to figure out how to let a few people into the gallery for small shows. Like some of the SIU students want to have their galleries in there, hang their work and have a presentation in there at the Carbondale Community Arts. So we're trying to help the students be able to have that and limit the number of people that we let in.
Yeah.
So that'll be if we get the school back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another option that we need to make sure as nonprofits we're looking at is our grant writing. So what we do know, I don't know if anybody else had saw this, but about 3 weeks ago, there was a move by several of the largest foundations, including like the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller, the MacArthur Foundation, and even I think Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where they have committed to taking their grant making to almost doubling it in the next year and a half over the level they had been. So typically those large foundations will grant about 5% of their earnings, of their total value each year, because that's the minimum. And that way their endowment continues to grow year after year, and they still have more money to grant each year. During a period like this, though, many of them have acknowledged that they need to find a way to grant at a higher level. And even, so what's unique about the Ford Foundation is their CEO went out and he issued a bond. He basically took a loan out so that he could grant about twice his normal amount for the next year and a half or 2 years. And they will be paying that back over the next 15 years. So they have looked for ways to do that. And so when you talk about whether it's in the arts or in where we're helping, direct service to social service organizations, they have all recognized that they need to give. Typically, they would like to fund things like how to expand programs and that. But what they've recognized is that for the next 2 years, they need to fund operating capacity. How do we keep the lights on? How do we continue to serve who we're currently serving? I don't know that today you need to go and create a new program of how to serve a whole new community when you need to focus on how to serve what you've already been doing. It's not developing new programs. It's how do we continue to serve those we were already providing services to.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And Byron, did you find there was a lot more matching grant opportunities?
There are. Matching grants are definitely very popular. So if you can say that you have this much funding, or you can do a certain amount of funding in the local community, then writing your grant saying we can raise the first 10,000. If you can grant us another 10, then we can make sure that everybody's going to have their needs met for the next 6 months or year, whatever time period. And in the case of a facility like an arts or something like that, where you're just trying to make sure you keep the doors open until the time where you can bring everybody in again. It is unique in that they're willing to provide operating grants. Normally, especially in the like in the arts sector, they would only want to fund a new display or a new, something new that brings something new to the community. And they're willing right now to just say, no, we'll help you pay your light bill to make sure you stay open. And when the world gets back to whatever the new normal is going to be with social distancing, then you can worry about those new things.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yes.
Somebody else want to share what challenges, obstacles they've had, or maybe even what opportunities they have?
I don't mind to share a little.
Yeah.
Some of our challenges, probably March, April, and May, we probably raised about 75% of our annual budget. So the timing for us has been really critical. Certainly the winter, the November, December, January, even February is pretty quiet for us, but March, April, and May really begins to pick up. We have some fundraising events during that time that are pretty large. And our gift shop actually at Ball Knob Cross has become our number one, what am I trying to say? Financial, generating finances. And so we were closed, for such a long time. So financially, I mean, it's going to have a huge impact for the course of the year. We bring in most of our revenue during that time. We don't necessarily spend it all during that time. So while we're coasting as we speak, it's kind of like during that time is the revenue that we need for September, October, November. So that's when we're really going to begin to feel it if we can't really begin to make up some of that. So that's kind of been the impact for us. The other one is the volunteers. We are primarily volunteer supported, which I think most nonprofits are. Just even our gift shop is open 7 days a week, and it's all volunteers. I just coordinate the volunteers. So we've had, even when we could reopen, I have about a third of my volunteers who are not comfortable coming back. Even it's a small gift shop, and we have lots of safeguards in place. But I don't have a full group back yet. So just trying to keep us going in that respect. We were able to apply for and receive the PPP grant for payroll, which has been wonderful. There's there's 4 staff. I'm not quite full-time. I'm 30 hours a week. And then we have 2 staff that's 10 hours a week and a groundskeeper. So there's not much in terms of staff, but boy, it's been critical. So we were able to do that, which is kind of kept us going, with that. So we're looking at a couple of additional fundraisers, but we're mostly trying to do the fundraisers that we already have on tap. How do we do those better and smarter? Maybe make those more revenue generating rather than trying to do a lot of extra stuff that we don't have manpower to do, so.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Teresa has a good point about volunteers too, and that there may be a lack of volunteers, but we may also have to look at different demographics, for volunteers too. And, for example, Byram and I helped put together the Marion United celebration for our high school graduates a couple Saturdays ago. And I know that when I was calling churches, they were responding, well, our regular volunteer groups are probably not the people to ask right now because they're people in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And so I had to look elsewhere. I had to look at more of the teenage, young adult groups and see if they were willing. And it turned out they were eager to get out and do something outdoors. And so, and on the other hand, I know that Heartland Regional Medical Center, we in March let all of our volunteers go home and they won't be back for a while because they're in that 60s, 70s, 80s group. So big impact for volunteer-driven, volunteer-centered nonprofits. Jill, can you tell us a little bit about your fundraising and how you see the current and the future?
We, as Teresa said, we had a major fundraising event. Really.
I can't hear her very well. Can anybody else hear Jill?
Can you hear me?
I think the microphone needs, yeah, there you go. It's a little better.
Okay. So one of our largest fundraising events was in April for our gala that we did.
I think it cut back out, Jill. I think maybe the way that you're turned, or maybe it's just the volume.
How's that?
That's a little better.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry. So we've had to cancel one of our major fundraising events, and we're looking at another fundraising event we do in August, so we may have to cancel. So special events is probably a third of our annual budget. So we're going to have to look at other avenues to really recoup those dollars. We have been pretty successful in doing our COVID-19 relief fund through employee giving and through the community, but we're granting that out back to the community. So that's not really helping us internally for dollars. I do have a question. I spent a lot of time on meeting with major gift donors, and I haven't, in the last 3 months, obviously I've been calling on people to meet with me one-on-one. Is anybody reaching out now, and now that some of the restaurants are open up or your businesses are open up, are you meeting individually with major gift donors, or is it still more phone and email? I'm just curious as to what the response has been from your prospects and donors.
Yeah.
Could you repeat her question? I only got part of it.
Yeah, what I heard was that Jill's asking, is anybody that usually meets face-to-face with donors, have you re-engaged in that strategy again? Are you meeting face-to-face? Or if you're not doing that with your major donors, what are you doing? Is that correct, Jill?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, my system is not working here well.
That's okay.
At Carbondale Community Arts, we have not met out with our donors. We are sending letters to our donors about what we're trying to do to keep just afloat at Carbondale Community Arts, and that we hope to, like Jill was saying, that we hope to have a art opening of some kind in August, September, when the students come back to SIU. So we're trying to gear up to get ready, and we I pray that we can for that. We haven't met them personally yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are your boards still meeting? Are you doing WebEx? Board?
We're at Carbondale Community Arts. We've been doing Zoom,
Okay.
but this week we're going to go into the actual Carbondale Community Arts building and social distance and wear masks and try that strategy for our fundraising event. And then if that works out this Thursday and that looks good, then we're going to try to bring the full board in and set us all around in there in some kind of big old circle or something and meet Monday night. So, but we've been doing Zoom.
Yeah.
We've done similar. We only meet every other month, and there's only 9 board members, so we're not a large group. So we met by Zoom in April, but in June we met at a church in a bigger room, and we just distanced, and we did meet face to face for that. I've not been meeting face to face with any donors at this point.
Right. Yeah.
I know in my coaching and also doing some fundraising for the Marion Task Force with the Boys and Girls Club, giving people options is what I've had to do, you know. And many people, when I say, well, I'll do the coaching by phone, or can we talk about donations by phone? A lot of people have been accepting that invitation and was not ready to meet, you know, face to face. But Zoom is another tool. You know, I've heard Byron mention that for the Community Foundation board. They went ahead and decided that all of their board meetings would be by Zoom for the rest of this year, which has a bit of an advantage, has disadvantages, but it has a bit of advantage in that you're getting everyone to participate where not everybody might be able to be in the room because of their work or because of family commitments. And so I would, you know, support giving people options, you know, whether they can meet in face to face or especially you know, again, the impact has been uneven for people, and there's a lot of people still worried, still scared, or just safe.
I will say that one of the benefits of the Zoom meetings that we found, not only did it help us just get through this time period, is that when we actually meet with our board members, I put on the screen what I'm talking about and what we're looking at, and we have much shorter discussions because everybody's on the same page, so to speak. And you don't have people searching through their packet trying to figure out what page we're on and what we're trying to talk about. So we've had some shorter meetings where we've got through a lot more information just because we were able to really focus on one topic at a time, and it cut down a lot of side conversations as well. So
Sure.
We'll continue to use it.
Yeah, Zoom PowerPoint's wonderful. I haven't ever seen that before. It's great.
Jill, I think your question comes from the strategy that many of us are used to, and that's, you know, making the appointments and going and seeing people face to face, and that's been the most difficult time right now.
Yes, it is.
Definitely, yes. I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable and ask, you know, set up an expectation where they can't quite fulfill and then make them feel uncomfortable with the request. But then it's like you can't not reach out. So just trying to find the balance of when is a good time to get people reengaged. You know, and there's still phone and there's still Zoom and there's still WebEx and there's ways to do it. But wanting to get back to the normal, but we might not be, you know, normal for a long time. So how do we function in this new world?
Yeah, and like I said earlier, it's very much shooting from the hip. It's not having the knowledge that, you know, we talked so much about data-driven, you know, fundraising or data-driven organizations. There's no data on this. There's no this unprecedented, uncharted time. And again, with organizing the Marion United event, we didn't know how many people would come out to the Tower Square. We thought as many as 3,000, but then we also thought may not have but a few hundred. We knew we'd have some of the families of the graduates, and we'd have some graduates of Marion High School class of 2020. But I think we estimated about 1,200 people showed up, and where I was prepared to social distance and put on my mask, no one else was. and it was surprising for, you know, because I guess it was an outdoor event that people came face to face and talked with people, and that they reconnected. And I think it just shows the eagerness to reconnect with live people, in the same space. We had set it up for everybody to, be careful, wear your mask suggested, social distancing was recommended, and we had a large enough space we could hold 3,000 and still social distance. But I didn't see a lot of people doing that.
Yeah.
Another question I'd have, I don't know if anybody has looked at it very hard, but a week ago, I guess a little over a week ago, the governor announced these grants to the DCEO, Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And he talked about a grant called the Business Interruption Grant. A lot of this was focused on restaurants, bars, fitness centers, barbershops, and salons. But there was also another section of it called severe disproportionately impacted areas. And on that one, you can, as a 501c3, apply for it if you can show that, number one, you had in 2019, your business was between $80,000 and $2 million. And during the time period since March 21st, you experienced $20,000 in operating loss. So I think it's interesting, and I don't know if anybody has looked at that very hard. For the foundation, we're not going to apply for that one. We did the PPP as well. But I think for some of the larger nonprofits, especially those that when you're, like Teresa, you're talking about your main revenue source is your gift shop. And when that was shut down, it's taken away all of your revenue. And if that would exceed $20,000, during a 3-month period, then you might have an opportunity to apply for that. Ladine, I don't know if that would for you. Jill, I don't know. And I don't know if any of the others would have that large of a loss in operating revenue during that time period. But if anybody does look at it and applies for it, it'd be great to share just the experience you had, and maybe not today, but please send us an email or something so we know. We've been looking for the opportunity. I also know that I don't have it here. I would pull it up, but the areas that were the most, it was kind of throughout the state. There were just certain areas that were more severely impacted. So I know, like, if you're in Carbondale, that's definitely one of the areas that showed a more larger economic impact during this period. So.
Okay. All right. I'll check into that. I'm not sure. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Russ, this is John. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Our fiscal year ends today, so I scheduled in-person check presentations yesterday and today because, desperate times and all that kind of stuff. I needed $20,000 to reach our fundraising goal, so if people were willing to do check presentations, I was willing to be there. So that worked out all right. I probably, other than this morning, haven't sat inside a building across a desk from someone since the beginning of March. I think at the Women's Center we have had what turned out to be an advantage in that about 85% of our locally raised fundraising usually occurs in the 6-month period from October 1st through March 31st. Now that encompasses the end of the calendar year, which has been really good for fundraising. It includes our fundraiser, Taste of Chocolate, in February, that fortunately was in February, not March, April, or May. But in April, May, and June, I actually had the time to do things that I probably should have been doing for years. Our donor database has a wealth of data that, go figure, that we put everything in for 20 years, but haven't asked for much in return. And, we can find out people who have donated like for 2 consecutive years, but hadn't yet this year and follow up with them. People who are first-time fundraisers a year ago who hadn't given yet. People who gave to our last capital campaign who seemingly fell off the face of the earth for the last 12 years. So there are a lot of things that I could have done, I would argue should have done, but if I was meeting people like I normally was, I probably wouldn't have done. And you know, we brought in $60,000 in May and June, and that's totally unprecedented. You know, last year, probably because I was doing business as usual, we brought in less than half of that.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. John, those are all great points. And I totally agree with you is that there's opportunities to dig into your prospects, whether you have a prospect generator or you just have some type of data capture, to spend some time examining that, because a lot of us who have been active fundraisers haven't had the time to do that. And so, and the other thing is to just look at this time of how you can add value to your donors instead of asking, for donation or asking them to add value to you. Use this time to be creative and think, how can you add value to them? Whether it's simply just thanking them, by note card or by phone call. But also to, is there, some type of gift that you can send them, or just send them a newsletter or an update of telling them that you're still here, that your mission is still important, that the people that you're serving, whether family, children, or faith group, whatever it might be, that the needs are great, and that and these are the ways that you're addressing, these needs during COVID-19. So it's communication piece. It's an opportunity to stay connected with the people, your stakeholders that support you. But it's a unique time, to do that. I know in fundraising, we always hoped, quarter by quarter, that we're always thanking people and that we were always giving value. But the fact is that we got busy asking for money all the time, asking for support. So this is a great time, maybe not to be so forceful in asking for support, but giving value, however that might be, whether it's just a phone call and checking on the health and wellness of some of your donors.
Yes.
Well, I think there's other nonprofits that also maybe need to take this time to reflect on what they do. I read a great article on reimagining your nonprofit, and it came from the Harvard Business Review, and it talks about how many nonprofits are suffering right now. Some of them are contemplating whether they're going to keep their doors open or not, and so maybe spending more reflective time and think about what is their impact, kind of define what they want to do, and then maybe even surveying the people that are their stakeholders or the people that they support, and asking some key questions of reflection about the people that they serve and the people that support them. And then another area was in finance, is really getting back to how much does it cost to do what we want to do, and how do we maybe refigure that to get the biggest bang out of our dollars, out of our donor dollars. And then also look at community, and each one of our nonprofits is just a segment of the larger communities that we serve, and maybe looking at core constituents or other nonprofits or other beneficiaries, and looking at yourself, and maybe even partnering with another nonprofit who has a similar mission, and how can you guys bring your strengths, bring your resources together to not just stay afloat, but to thrive. And this might be the time where we see some of our nonprofits merge, but it might be a great opportunity to continue our missions by doing that.
This is Jill. I totally agree with that. During COVID, we have been allowed to grant out money to a lot of community organizations, and that's normally not in the scope of what we do. And it's been very, very rewarding, and it's been great to get to know a lot of these other nonprofits and just to see how we can all work together. I'm raising money for other nonprofits, and it's just been very rewarding.
Yeah.
I have never been quite in this situation where we're raising money for other groups, but I we're a small community, and we all have to be here for each other to get through all this.
Yeah. Yeah, this certainly has been the time to give back in unusual or unpredicted ways. But I use Community Foundation as an example again. I've seen more things about Byram giving away checks on Facebook than just about any other, giving back to the community. And that's fantastic. It raises the awareness of the Community Foundation. But as Jill said, it's being useful. It's being able to, use this time in a valuable way to give.
And I think one thing that's important, Jill, you've talked about doing something different than what you've been able to do. Our ability to share amongst each other and collaborate as nonprofits is different than the for-profit world. So you would not see a group of people like this if we were all restaurant owners talking about how we could all do a better job of making money, because we would each be trying to work to steal the customers from each other. In the nonprofit world, it is a completely different aspect, because at the end of the day, a lot of the same people that were the constituents or the community members that we're trying to serve are maybe being touched by more than one of us, because they're getting food or shelter or the arts community and the being able to go to parks and recreation and all of these things. It all has to work together. If we compete against each other, then it doesn't work well in the nonprofit community. So and that's where we're talking about what events we are still going to have this fall. For the Community Foundation, the only thing we will head towards, and we'll talk about in a future meeting, is what we're going to be doing to help all nonprofits with Giving Tuesday. But we will not be doing any other type of events, so that we can leave a lot of space for other nonprofits to do the fundraising that they need to do to survive this year. But we want to know what you're doing so we can help promote your events as well, because the better each of you do fundraising, the better the whole community of nonprofits does in Southern Illinois.
Oh, we're approaching the top of the hour, so I'm going to wrap some things up, and just want to thank you all for joining us. Again, I'm Russell Williams. I'm a new staff member here at the Community Foundation. I'm Director of Community Impact Learning and Leadership. I also do leadership coaching. I've done masterminds around this community, and also the Live to Lead event that we're going to try to have in October, face-to-face at the Pavilion in Marion. But I'm very happy to serve you in any way that I can, as a leadership coach or a trainer or a facilitator for online events or face-to-face events with your organization or you as a leader. Just want to offer that. And so I'm putting my cell phone and email there if you'd like to contact me. We're going to send out a survey email here in right after this, after we close today. And so this is a follow-up for Philanthropy Speaks. We want to get some feedback about our time together, and because we want to continue to serve you in the best way possible. So there's a few questions that you're going to find. We appreciate if you will send that back to us. Word of mouth is also good too. If you could invite some of your other nonprofit leaders and volunteers and board members to join us for the next time we do this. We are planning on continuing this each month. We're calling it the third Tuesday Roundtable. So our next one is scheduled for July 21st. And as Byron mentioned on the front end, we'll have a special program, which I think is a current topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion in nonprofits. And we're working on a special presenter, a special speaker that can help us look at this diversity, equity, and inclusion in our communities, but especially across our nonprofit organizations, and how do we respond. And so thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to facilitate.
Thank you.
yeah, if you have any questions or any feedback, you can respond to the survey by email or just contact us at the Community Foundation. Byron, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you all.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Have a great week. Have a
good day.
great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.